this week. A listener reminds us that Chinese-made EVs may be good for the environment, but not necessarily good for Chinese workers like the Uyghur population. He still gave us 4 stars in his review, though. My review of his review is only 3 stars, however.
And I give that joke 2 stars.
Yeah, well, I'd give you a review of my review 1 star. How about that?
Uber in Canada wants to go all electric by 2030. But the main problem with Uber is not the emissions, it's getting into the back seat of a Toyota Corolla. My back just can't take it anymore.
The IEA's annual World Energy Outlook is out, and the outlook is for oil not so good, much like the prospects for Elon Musk finding joy.
In addition to nuclear power, Google, the world's largest, smartest search engine, is going big on solar. Okay, so here's what you do. Stop the podcast and Google James Whittingham, the sabbatical, and marvel at the image that Google, the genius Google, has chosen to represent James. It'll be the most fun thing you do all day. I do this every time I need a little pick-me-up.
I made a whole comedy podcast on that. It was quite weird, and it's still weird, and I reported it. All that and more in this edition of the Clean Energy Show. And also this week, man, do we got a lot of stuff. I doubt we can fit it into the hour that TikTok and Instagram will restrain us to, but if you're listening on your podcast app or on YouTube, you're going to get the whole darn thing today. More of us. We're going to have more on the plus side of robotaxis. The Ford CEO gets candid on EV plans. Blade Runner suing Tesla. Electric motorcycles are used in war. The EU is subsidizing fossil fuels like crazy. China's significant role in EV adoption, high-speed rail, and alternative energy for trucks is reducing oil demand greatly. Bike lanes are way more efficient at moving people. There's new geothermal in the United States, and India goes big on solar, and Germany gets into the battery recycling game.
Wow, that's a lot. Okay, well, I'll try and make it quick then. My little personal updates for the week. First of all, our friend Barry, a listener to the show, lives in Ontario at a rural property, an old friend of ours, and he just put up a tracking solar panel.
Bold move, Barry. Bold move.
Bold move, absolutely. It looks like it'll pivot on, it's a single pillar, and so it looks like it'll pivot on all axes, and it's 10 kilowatts. But, you know, with only like 10 kilowatts, it's kind of a normal size for a house, but because it's a tracking, mechanism, I imagine he'll get way, way more than a standard, stationary 10 kilowatt system. So yeah, he says he's going to kind of see how it goes and, maybe add another one depending on what the production ends up like.
So he's going to have maybe more electricity produced than his house will use. Therefore, Barry, you need to go buy an EV. So send us a letter and we'll advise you what your wishes are for that. No, looks
use
cool.
Up all that extra power. And the coolest thing I thought about it was the footprint of it, because 10 kilowatts.
It's basically nothing because it's
basically nothing.
I was surprised though how high it was. Like you could herd cattle underneath of it. I don't know if Barry's going to get into cattle anytime soon, or maybe alpacas, or maybe giraffes. But yeah, it's high for some reason. Snowpack. It's a rural Ontario thing, so maybe there's drifts of snow. I don't know.
Yeah, and I suppose you could always just rotate it straight up if you needed to knock some snow off of it too. But like 10 kilowatts on a ground-mounted system would take up quite a lot of space. But there's a single pedestal, which is, that's really cool.
Yeah, it's one single thing sticking up out of a cement base, and it's just a pole with this rack that rotates in both directions. It is bidirectional, right? I mean, it would adjust for winter, because we have big variations up here in Canada between winter, the angle of the sun, and the ideal angle for solar panels is more vertical in the wintertime.
Yeah, I imagine it directly tracks the sun all day. That's what I would guess. And they're also bifacial panels.
Ooh.
So
then why are they so far up off the ground? I have questions, Barry. Many questions. Set your solar installer in touch with me. You know how to get a hold of me.
Yeah. Okay, so the other thing is I took a trip to Saskatoon a few days ago. Lovely city near us. I go there a lot. I went to see the Phantom of the Opera, the 1925 silent film version starring Lon Chaney, and they do these events often silent films with live music. And it is fantastic. It's at the Roxy Cinema in Saskatoon. And there was this guy who plays a digital accordion. Have you ever heard of that?
No. That's interesting and weird.
It's like an accordion, but it's fully digital. It's sort of like a synthesizer. Really.
Why did they feel they need to have to do that? Because there's not enough accordions in the world? We better digitize those because they're so darn popular?
Well, here's the thing. Once you digitize it, you can make it do any sound. And this guy, his name is Michael Bridge. He's from here. He's a musician. He often plays in, classical music settings with symphonies and stuff. But he has specially programmed his digital accordion to do specific things. So it was a fully live musical performance, but it was kind of like hearing a whole orchestra because he can do percussion. He can do, string sounds and organ sounds. It was super fun. But the main reason I bring it up is, so I was driving my Tesla Model S, which doesn't have full self-driving. We haven't paid for it on that one. But just as I was leaving Saskatoon, it gave me the option for a free 30-day trial of full self-driving. So I thought, okay, I'll turn this on and I'll have the car drive me home on this highway trip, 2.5-hour highway trip. And it was really great. And it made me think that it's reached a point now where FSD is worth something to buy. Like, it doesn't work all the time and you can't put it on and then go to sleep in the back seat or anything like that. But it has enough features and functionality now. I think it's worth paying for. And it's kind of where I expected it to be about 2 years ago. It's basically about 2 years late from what I was thinking it would be. But it was really helpful and useful, and I was really glad that I had it. Have you ever driven a car that had a lane change assist feature?
No.
Yeah, so it's a common thing on many cars where you're on the highway and you can put on the turn signal and it will do the lane change for you. And
so
we got that
basically
for the first...
cruise control with adaptive cruise control. So it follows the car in front of you if it's going slower. And you put on the left lane, it'll turn to that lane and go to the speed that you've desired, which is higher than the car in front of you, I assume.
Yeah, it changes lanes for you, and it uses its cameras or its sensors or whatever to make sure that you don't, run into anybody while you're changing lanes. So we first got that 2 or 3 years ago when we first got FSD. We'd never had that before. And it's one of those features where you think, well, I don't need that. Like, I know how to change lanes on the highway. I've done it a million times. I don't really need that. But it was the first thing about the FSD that was super useful. Like, once you have that, it's hard to go back because it's just simpler and safer. Like, the car checks for you if there's somebody there. And if you try to change lanes and there's a car in your blind spot, it will see it and not change lanes. So I guess, like, my point is there's enough of those other kinds of features now where it's worth paying for. And it's debatable what the price should be. But it was just a way more relaxing drive to have the car drive for me on the way home 99% of the time. You don't have to put your hands on the steering wheel anymore. It uses the camera to
Any phantom stops that have been plaguing Teslas?
No, I haven't had phantom braking for quite a while. That was always an issue with Tesla, where we would just start slowing down for no reason. Didn't have that at all. So yeah, it was way more relaxing. And the feature, I would say, even though it's not perfect, it doesn't drive in every case, and it's going to depend on every person and what kind of driving you do. But it's now a worthwhile feature.
Well, our car has, lane change warnings, which I really appreciate. And I tend to sort of relax more. That's most of my tension, is am I twisting my big old head around, which doesn't twist as much as it used to. And, in the old days, I could spin it 360, just like The Exorcist. But
yeah, and my least favorite Uber car is a Toyota Corolla, which I mentioned off the top there. Those are nasty to get into the back seat.
I know, my son has one.
Oh. You got to crane your neck down. I always bang my head.
So you're taking an Uber?
No, that's separate thing.
Separate thing. Okay.
Just a separate complaint about the back seat of Toyota Corollas.
Well, point taken. This is a brief update to my Robotaxi World Imagined video that we did last week. It's still available on all of our platforms. And yes, it is only showing the advantages of a Robotaxi World, trying to look at the different things that other people maybe not have necessarily thought of. But if users have pointed out, when I was watching some Tesla users take a Waymo for the first time in Los Angeles, they pointed out that it drives more smoothly than an Uber driver, speaking of Ubers. That Uber drivers get to, they'll set the temperature however they like. Maybe they'll have the window open on a cold day because they're crazy. And
talk radio on the radio.
And talk radio, and you can choose your own music. It'll have relaxing, literally, ambiance music when you get in, but you can choose whatever music you want and have that play, and you can choose whatever temperature you want, and it'll drive smoothly. So that is another advantage that I like. And next time we do a test on your car, we did a test, a 30-minute drive with us driving around town without touching the steering wheel as our bonus episode for our Patreon subscribers. And yeah, you had it on a very aggressive setting. I want you to change that next time so it's less.
There's chill or aggressive settings, but I tend to keep it on aggressive because
you don't want people but I thought it's too aggressive. Is there a compromise?
I think there is a middle setting. So
because I don't think people, even aggressive people, don't drive like that unless they're angry. Or they really have to go to the bathroom, or they're going to the 7-Eleven to get cigarettes because the nicotine is killing them. I see it a lot. I see a lot of aggressive driving, and then I notice, because I live near a 7-Eleven, that they go to 7-Eleven, and I'm guessing it's not for a Slurpee because they're so anxious. So Tesla is announced that they're not going to have a steering wheel, and I thought that's kind of in their new robotaxi that they debuted last week. If you get approval in a jurisdiction like the driverless companies are in California, for example, and others, 4 other states, they have a human driver for the first year or something, or so whatever the period of time is. There's a human driver there that can take over. Then once the interventions is proven to be low or non-existent, then they can go without the driver. So I don't know how Tesla is going to approach that regulatory. They can have a driver there who pushes a stop button on the screen or something like that, but they can't really do much to control it without a steering wheel or pedals on the floor.
Yeah, well, the nicest thing about Tesla cars is that they are all digitized. Every function is digitized and controllable by a computer. So yes, if you had to, you could probably steer a Tesla with a touchscreen or with your phone or something. Pull out your phone and
I don't like that. I've tried doing that with drones. It didn't work. I think I lost a window. So wireless charging also, they announced that they had wireless charging. They came out with some specifics to that because these robotaxis would park over a wireless charging pad. It's been around for a long time. You do lose some efficiency. The efficiency is getting better. The weights are getting better, but it's still extra cost and weight to the vehicle, which makes it less efficient. It's only going to charge at 25 kilowatts, which is half of what my slow charging Bolt charges at. So it would be there for a while, quite a while, to power up that vehicle.
No one knows what the battery size is for that Tesla robotaxi, and it's still 2 years away from production, so it remains to be seen. But because it's a fairly small vehicle, the battery could be quite a bit smaller than current Tesla cars. So, a slower charging speed might not be the worst.
So Jim Farley was on the Fully Charged YouTube show. He's the CEO of Ford, one of these companies in the United States, these legacy automakers who have been kind of shameful in the way they've approached EVs lately. And they came out with a couple of, they were the second best-selling EV until recently, when GM has now taken over because they released the Blazer and the Equinox.
And of course, he's the first cousin of Chris Farley, the late comedian.
Wow. That's amazing fact.
Fun fact.
So he was quite candid, I thought, but this is the first thing he said that kind of got me angry.
Maybe not realize this, but I hope they do. China made this commitment more than a decade ago.
Yeah.
Far before any of the Western countries fell in love with pure electrification.
Okay, so he said there that other companies that started 10 years ago, the Chinese have started more than 10 years ago. Well, guess how old my Nissan Leaf is? It's 12 years old. And it was the third model year. Come on. And when the years before the Leaf came out, you and I both knew that electrification was the future, that range would get longer, price would get cheaper, technology would get better. You didn't have to be a brain surgeon. I'm no brain surgeon. I'm no rocket scientist. I knew
and
that.
in places like Europe, they've literally had laws in place, warning car makers like 10 years ago that you're going to have to go electric, and they did not heed the warnings.
So I wanted everyone else to get on board and to start working on it. I assumed they were. They weren't. But anyway, he now realizes that China is going to eat their lunch. So he's talking about the stigma of working for Toyota for 20 years, that his family didn't even talk to him in Michigan. And some of his family didn't even talk to him for working for, because Toyota did kill jobs. Well, this is going to be a lot worse than Toyota. And he's also talking about Skunk Works, this project in California. They took it away from Michigan to start over on EV production. And
I worked there for 20 years.
Right.
My family was not happy. They wouldn't talk to me here in Detroit because they were ashamed that I worked there. And there was a huge social cost in the Midwest of the U.S. for the success of Toyota. So many jobs were lost, including many people in my family. And, I can't unlearn that as a young man. I can't unlearn the fact that the Detroit 3 really never had a plan. And we're not going to miss this one. Bill Ford and I shook hands or embraced whatever metaphor you want to use. And we said, this one, we're going to have to get it right from scratch. Yeah. And that's why we created the Skunk Works team in California, because I felt like the institution of Ford would have a really tough time competing with BYD. So we needed a ground up team with a similar approach as Kelly Johnson's SR-71, Skunk Works in California. My badge doesn't even work there. I can't even get in the building.
So it's a very different operation that they have. They're trying to do what they should have done at least 10 years ago, and that is build an EV from the ground up. Don't use the system that you're using that's been around for 120 years or whatever. Use a different system, because everything is different with EVs. Like he went on to point out that, the different problems with EVs are only in the battery, but in the cars, there's transmission things that can go wrong that are unfixable and things like that. And so the batteries have to be correct. And, I still see some Chevy Bolt users with bad batteries. So I don't know what's going on there, and I don't know how rampant that problem is. I certainly don't want to have that problem, because it takes a while to get a new battery, and you got to drive a Toyota Corolla as a gift car. Anyway, Amnesty International came out with a report on EV makers, I think just last week, and this is how EV makers monitor potential human rights abuses. Potential. They need to monitor. If they don't know something, then they don't know. So it doesn't mean abuses are happening, but this is in the supply chain. So we're mostly talking about mines here. So if you get aluminum mine or stuff for aluminum from a mine, and you're not monitoring what goes on there, there could be potential human rights abuses. The report warns that automakers aren't doing enough to prevent these abuses, and it ranked 13 of the largest EV companies based on their human rights practices. BYD, which is the Chinese automaker, and Mitsubishi, the Japanese automaker, scored the worst, while Mercedes-Benz and Tesla scored the highest, but they were still far, far from perfect. They were only an average score. And no company is adequately ensuring human rights in their supply chains, especially when sourcing key materials like cobalt, lithium, copper, and nickel. Companies must be more transparent, they say, where they get their materials and how they handle these risks. Without better safeguards, mining for these materials could harm communities and push people off their land and create dangerous working conditions. Most companies lack policies protecting indigenous rights, which are recognized by the United Nations. Governments can help by enforcing environmental and human rights protections, and they call for transparency and action to prevent abuses as the demand for EV batteries grow. But this is true, I think, for all products. All products require mining for the most part. And if you're not looking at that, if you buy a pencil, you have to wonder, where that came from. Of course, EVs, bigger products, and growing.
Yeah, and because it's growing so quickly, there's a lot of new types of mining happening or expansion of mining in certain areas like nickel. And so when something is rapidly expanding like that, it's often when you run into these kinds of problems.
So in summary, the EVs are important, of course, for fighting climate change, but the industry needs to improve how it protects people affected by the mining of battery materials. We'll talk more about this later in the show when we talk about China and their groups of Uyghurs.
Okay, so from Power Magazine, I wanted to talk about this because we've been talking about big tech lately, big tech companies betting on nuclear power. All these tech companies are going to need a ton of power to power their AI and data centers, but this one was about solar and Google, so I thought I should mention it here. Japan's SoftBank Group and Air's Climate Infrastructure said that 3 solar projects are now online in Texas. SB Energy built these farms. It's about 900 megawatts of combined generation, and this is going to support the grid, but also Google's data centers. It's not going to go directly to Google necessarily, but they're going to buy a lot of the power going onto the grid from this, and it's in the Dallas area. And this is one of those projects that it sounds like it's going to qualify for a lot of the subsidies from the Inflation Reduction Act, because they're trying to do as much of this domestically in the U.S. as possible. The more that you can source the components in America, the more you kind of qualify for these grants and subsidies that the Inflation Reduction Act meant to spur on clean energy projects. So there's about 1.3 million American-made solar modules and American-made steel and things like that that are going into this project. But I really wanted to mention it just because we've been talking about nuclear for data and AI centers. And this is not just announced. This is not just for the future. It's open. It's now online. And that's how much quicker this solar stuff moves than the nuclear. I, wish them luck with those future nuclear projects, but, it seems hard to beat that, this is already online at 900 megawatts, which is significant.
Significant, and at its peak output would match many of the nuclear reactors in the world that are there right now. But of course, it's only really, less than 20% or around 25%. Probably in Texas, around 25% of what a nuclear reactor would put out their maximum stated capacity of something like this. But like you said, you can build these suckers as fast as you like. And, nuclear takes a long time. Even if you're restoring an old nuclear reactor, that's going to take a bit of time. We only have to 2035 to get 80% or more of the grid decarbonized, completely decarbonized.
Yeah. This is a bit of an emergency. So Google's target, they want to be carbon free by 2030 as a company. And Texas, meanwhile, we've talked about this before, Texas is really leading in installing renewables. So there's now about 30% of the electricity in Texas is coming from renewables. And, they're leading in all these new clean energy installations.
And it's growing so fast. Now I'm going to talk about China because we had a actual review here on September 30th from someone named The Volt. Maybe he owns a Volt car. Maybe, I don't know.
Chevy Volt.
It's possible. He says, I love the show and the hosts have great chemistry. One quibble is the uncritical approach to electric cars. Chinese electric cars come with some real issues. Uyghur labor and massive state subsidies are subjects that should be discussed. The consequences of these are real, and the consequences of rare earth mining. That being said, the show is excellent. Now, we have discussed this, but I've been going on a lot about China because there's been such huge China news, and I keep thinking, we need to throw in the caveats now and again, but people forget the caveats.
No, and you made a comment a couple of weeks ago. People are going to start to think we're being funded by the Chinese because we're reporting so much of the expansion of clean energy in China.
But
we're not.
Our point of view is looking at climate change and what's being done about it. We don't delve deep into the politics because there's a lot of negatives of everything, and this is no different. Now, he does mention the consequences of rare earth mining, which is an environmental problem. I am less concerned about that because there's so much news, and we're going to even talk about it later in the lightning round, of recycling. So once we get to all the batteries we need, which could take to 2060 or something like that, we won't need to mine anymore. And we'll just keep recycling those minerals over and over again.
And more mining is not the best, but guess what we're doing now is we're doing tons of fossil
mining
fuel
oil. And it's far
being
worse.
mined at an alarming, horrendous rate. So really, the worst thing you can possibly do is dig up oil and burn it. So there's obviously issues with all kinds of mining, but this will eliminate the fossil fuel mining, which is the worst of all of it.
Now, I'm not defending the massive state subsidies, but I will also point out, of course, that there is massive state subsidies for oil and gas and the automotive industry in North America. And I don't think people are talking about that because the Inflation Reduction Act has put many, many, many billions of dollars into battery plants, and that's going to be part of subsidizing North American auto industry.
No, and there was a story this week, I think it was Europe, I believe, where company cars, fossil fuel company cars, there's sort of like a loophole in Europe where you can get like tax breaks and subsidies for buying company cars, and it works best for fossil fuel cars. So like there's always these kind of sneaky, weird fossil fuel subsidies that everyone mostly takes for granted because it's kind of been that way for 100 years.
So here where we live in our Canadian province, there's an election underway, and the left of center party is offering to take off the gas tax, the road tax that is on gasoline, because, you know, prices are high, and that's the biggest issue there is. And incumbent governments all over the world, because of the post-COVID inflation, are getting axed. So what they're saying is we're going to take the gas tax off, which is the opposite of a carbon tax, which is an opposite of a pollution tax. And yet there's a tax on you and I for driving electric cars, $150 for that road tax. No mention of taking that off. No mention. I know there's fewer people. There's only thousands instead of tens of thousands, but come on. It's just, that's so much there. But let's get to the Uyghur people, because let's just talk about human rights for now. This is from Human Rights Watch. Global car makers, including General Motors, Tesla, BYD, Toyota, and Volkswagen, are failing to minimize the risk of Uyghur forced labor in China being used in their aluminum supply chains, Human Rights Watch said in a report released earlier this year. The 99-page report, Asleep at the Wheel, Car Companies' Complicity in Forced Labor in China, finds that some car makers have succumbed to Chinese government pressure to apply weaker human rights and responsible sourcing standards for their Chinese joint ventures than in their global operations. So yeah, they enforce it outside of China, but not inside of China. Most have done too little to map their aluminum supply chains and identify links to forced labor. Car companies, quote, simply don't know the extent of their links to forced labor in Xinjiang, in the area where the Uyghur people are, in their aluminum supply chain, said Human Rights Watch. And this is from the U.S. Department of Labor. Since 2016, the government of the People's Republic of China has subjected Uyghurs and members of other predominantly Muslim ethnic minority groups in the Xinjiang region Xinjiang region, trouble with Chinese, obviously, trouble with English, autonomous region, to genocide. The state-imposed forced labor and crimes against humanity are happening there. And this is because, well, there's 11 million people there. Most are Muslim and have their own language, which I didn't know until I was doing some research. And they have, there have been tensions between them and the Han majority in China for many years. Last week, we were talking about how the Chinese hardly see foreigners and that you were, you know, a thing when you went there and people took pictures with you.
People took pictures of me.
Well, they have a very homogenous society that is not diverse. And there were some problems because a bombing and mass murder in a knife attack killed 30 over a decade ago. And the government began to crack down in the Xinjiang region. And none of these acts justify the severity of the crackdowns, of course, but forced labor, children being indoctrinated into communism and China, you know, nationalism, women being sterilized or having to have abortions, work camps with people detained without charge. And Uyghurs are working in factories that are alleged to be in the supply chains of at least 83 global brands, including Apple, BMW, Gap, Huawei, and Nike, Samsung, Sony, and Volkswagen. Volkswagen. I write what I spell. I spell what I write. 80,000 may have been transferred out of their home territory to work in factories between 2017 and 2019. Yeah, that's when most of the bad things happened. And the last 2 U.S. administrations have called it a genocide. And the PRC officially recognizes 55 ethnic groups in addition to the Han majority. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of products, a lot of brands here implicated, a lot of them. But again, it's just like, do we know? We don't know for sure. But you need to, look at your supply chains. I think of Mountain Equipment Co-op, the sort of outdoor retailer in Canada that is, their prices are higher because they are very stringent on where they get their stuff from and how, rights are, protected, and they have to spend money to ensure that their factories where their stuff is being made is, decent, to say the least.
Yeah, that's certainly a difficult problem, obviously, to track all these components. Think about a company like Apple, like how much they need in terms of materials and supplies. Like, it's kind of insane, but they're also the biggest company in the world, so they should be able to afford to do the work necessary to make sure this doesn't happen.
Yeah, and I thank you for the review, and you can go and review us too, or you can send us an email. Brian, how do they get a hold of us?
Yeah, you can contact us at cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. You can also leave us a voicemail online. That's at speakpipe.com/cleanenergyshow. I love getting a SpeakPipe. Haven't had one in a while, so please look at us there. And we have an online community on Patreon where you can join and get some free content and then some additional content if you want to join and become a member.
And if you do want to join the Clean Club, you'll get perks like ad-free episodes and high-quality audio, 1 bonus episode per month, exclusive access to the Clean Energy Show Discord server, discounts at our merch store, thank you credits on our video podcast all the time, and shout-outs from time to time on our audio podcast at least once a month. And you can also support the podcast with a purchase at our Clean Energy store linked in your podcast show notes. Brian, have you been to the store lately? I've got all kinds of new merchandise up there. Some of it funny and interesting and quirky.
Excellent. We'll have to order some.
Very different than it was before. And I'd appreciate anyone's feedback if you'd like. If you don't have to buy stuff if you don't want to, but it does now support us with every purchase. It's not sold at cost anymore. So if you haven't been there in a while, take a look and, give us some feedback.
Okay, so we've got a letter here. It looks like you were talking with Timo on the Patreon page. Is that right?
Yes, Timo last week said, was talking about your rammed earth, and because he was an architect, as you'll recall. And he came back to our Patreon and said, thanks for the invitation. And also, let's hope I can make a fully electric trip from Switzerland to the middle of Canada. Well, Timo, I've got 2 words for you. Dirigible.
Wait, isn't that one word?
Yes. I didn't want to just give him one, though, so I hyphenated. Yeah. You'd have to fly over Russia, but you could get here. You'd probably get shot down. There's a risk of that, but I don't know. Hot air balloon? No, that uses fossil fuels, too. I don't know.
No, but I've always loved the idea of dirigibles or zeppelins or whatever you call them.
Blimps.
Blimps. Everyone talks about them coming back as a form of transportation.
Not yet.
Hasn't really happened yet. But anyway, there's another comment on the Patreon page from Sean. Does the framed earth, I assume that's a typo, rammed earth, I think it's supposed to be.
But the earth is literally framed in your rammed earth wall that we were talking about.
That's right, yeah. We've been talking about the rammed earth wall in front of my house, and Sean asks, does it need to be kept dry for the weather? The short answer is no. First of all, the weird thing, I don't know if you noticed this, but it has not rained here in at least 3 weeks.
It rained last night, and it smelled so weird. It's like, this reminds me of a summer from my childhood. I mean, it's been so long. It's now snowing, by the way, a little bit.
So, our friend John started building the wall about 3 weeks ago, and I was kind of wondering, gee, if it rains, is this going to interrupt what he's doing?
Well, that's a fair question, because he didn't cover it up, did he?
No, he never covered it up, but also I'm sure he looked at the forecast and realized it wasn't going to rain. But no, he said we don't need any kind of a cap on it. You could put one on if you wanted to, like some sort of a metal cap to it. We thought about maybe doing a railing or something. So if we end up doing a railing, then it would be a sort of a cap. But the short answer is no, it doesn't need to be covered up.
Okay, well, it's coming together, and you can see the ramp being formed. It's there on our Patreon page. You do not have to even sign up for an account or have a paid account. It's there as a public post. It's fascinating to me. Yeah, and it'll be done in a few weeks, like the last little bit will be done, right?
Yeah, they're just a few boards short in terms of the ramp, but it's now usable, and we're walking up there, and it's great.
All right, so the IEA, the International Energy Agency, has released its annual Global Energy Outlook. It is always big news for people like us, because usually they're upgrading previous forecasts where they were completely in the dark about renewables. Remember, this used to be just for fossil fuels. This energy agency was created in the 70s. Yeah, so the IEA has predicted that the demand for fossil fuels such as oil and natural gas will peak by 2030, and after that, the world could transition into what the IEA calls the age of electricity, where more energy will come from renewable resources rather than fossil fuels. The shift is driven by several factors, including the global effort to reduce carbon emissions and the increasing use of electric vehicles, which reduces the need for oil in the transportation sector. One of the key findings in the IEA's annual World Energy Outlook is that oil demand is expected to peak at just under 102 million barrels per day before 2030, and then decrease to 99 million by 2035. So it's a plateau, if you will, and a slow decline, is how most of these energy agencies and analysts are predicting, but we'll see. The transition to cleaner energy is accelerated by the potential surplus of oil and gas supplies, which could make them cheaper and push more countries to invest in green energy technologies. You and I think that's going to happen, so we'll see, but it seems like it's going to happen, and it seems like it's always surprising, these reports and analysts. However, the growth in clean energy is still not fast enough to meet rising electricity demands, which is going up. They warned that upcoming elections in countries that represent half the world's energy demand, including major economies, could also create uncertainty. Yeah, there's a lot of elections coming up here in the United States. Despite these challenges, the IEA estimates that nearly $2 trillion will be invested in clean energy in 2024. Brian, that is almost double the amount invested in fossil fuels, which is, we've been doing this for almost 5 years. Pretty amazing. Yeah. Read those words. They predict slumping oil demand in the next year, largely due to EV adoption in China, the use of natural gas in trucks in China instead of diesel, and the high-speed rail expansion in China, which is reducing the use of cars. So that link to that report is there in your show notes. Just wanted to touch base on that.
Yeah, that's great. All right, now from the Public Interest Research Group, found this story on Electrek, and it pointed me here to their website, pirg.org. This is a research group, and they've got this interactive map that I thought was really fabulous, tracking cities in the U.S. and which are doing something about heavily polluting lawn equipment. This is something we've talked about quite a bit. We had a video go viral on TikTok where we were talking about
1.6 million views on lawnmowers.
Yeah, on lawnmowers. I was talking about lawnmowers. And because they're these little two-stroke engines. They have little to no pollution controls on them.
And in places really like bad. Los Angeles, they actually create a significant amount of the air pollution, the particulate matter that goes into the air. It's amazing. And you can go to our TikTok page. And by the way, go to our TikTok page and sign up if you're a TikToker. And if you're not, find something better to do with your life.
Yeah, you don't want to go down that road. But so anyway, so there's a map here with, 2 or 3 dozen cities on it, and you can hover over each kind of city, and it tells you either, there's been an outright ban on the sale of new gas-powered lawn equipment, or sometimes they have incentives to purchase lawn equipment. So, for instance, here I just hovered over Portland, and Portland has a phase-out of gas leaf blowers. The use of gas leaf blowers in Portland is prohibited from January 1st through September 30th each year until the end of 2027. And starting in 2028, the use of gas-powered leaf blowers will be fully prohibited, even if you already own one. But, everybody's doing it in a slightly different way. In Wichita here in Kansas, they have an incentive to purchase electric lawn equipment. And where else here? In Maricopa County, again, they've got incentives to purchase cleaner lawn equipment. So, yeah, I thought that was a fabulous antidote. And often it is cities that are on the forefront of these things, because it's when you're walking around the city that you smell all that disgusting exhaust from, all of those leaf blowers. It's really a city issue. It's a city noise pollution issue as well as a pollution issue.
I'm looking here at the map, and Wyoming's on it, for God's sake. I mean, I'm mad now because Wyoming, it's not great. Sorry, Wyoming. I don't think we have any listeners in Wyoming. But
we can trash talk it all we want.
They have incentives to purchase electric lawn equipment, and we don't have anything like that. Man, we're the worst place in the world here where we live.
Yeah.
Worst place in the world.
No.
If Wyoming has something, good God.
I really want a clean energy lawn service here in my city. So if anybody is starting one or knows of one, let me know.
Or just go mow Brian's lawn with my electric lawnmower. I'll rent it to you.
Okay.
I've got an old one I bought for $10 and bought a $100 battery, a lead acid battery for it. But yeah, that's very interesting and, of course, encouraging. It's time for the Lightning Round.
The Lightning Round is a fast-paced look at the latest headlines in climate, clean energy, and transportation.
Tesla's under fire from the makers of Blade Runner 2049 for using depictions similar to the movie to promote the robotaxi, which, by the way, they've tried to trademark that term. Do you think that's going to happen? You think they're going to be able to trademark robotaxi?
It depends on when they first used it, or
I think we used it first. We should charge the money for it. The movie studio claims to have denied Elon Musk permission to use images from the film at the We, Robot event earlier this month. But Musk used the images anyway, the suit claims. The studio points out that there's a lot of hate speech coming out of Musk. No kidding! COP16, not to be confused with COP29. That's the annual climate summit to get countries to cooperate to meet Paris Accord agreements and things like that. Well, COP16 is a biodiversity summit. It's underway in Colombia right now. Colombia, speaking of the devil, looks to future of without oil in a $40 billion transition plan. You can look at that in Bloomberg. This is a clean energy show fast fact. A bike lane moved 2.5 times as many people as a regular traffic lane in a TfL study, and given that they are half the width, the study concluded that bike lanes are 5 times as efficient as vehicle traffic lanes. Some people think more.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And of course, sidewalks, highly efficient for moving people compared to traffic lanes. Russian soldiers are now using electric motorcycles. You can find that story on Electric or in your show notes. Mercedes-Benz is opening a new factory recycling batteries in southern Germany that covers 96% of battery materials. Pretty impressive. China, I think, has got up to 99 point something. So yeah, those are very high numbers, and we're just starting. So I don't see it getting worse. I see it getting better. A new study finds that the EU's 5 biggest members are pouring billions of dollars a year into subsidizing internal combustion company cars, which you mentioned, to the tune of $42 billion. That's insane. Yeah. That's insane. $42 billion for company cars?
Yeah, and I think this is just some sort of leftover regulation that they just didn't revamp when the world was switching to electric vehicles, something like that. But, they need to update these subsidies and laws.
The $35,000 Chevy Equinox has just been made available to order. This is breaking news. The Equinox EV also qualifies in the United States for the $7,500 EV tax credit, bringing down prices potentially as low as $27,500. That's under $28,000 is a steal for an all-electric SUV with nearly 320 miles of range. And the 2024 Toyota RAV4, that's the best-selling SUV in the United States this year, is even more expensive, starting around $30,000. Although probably a little bit better well-equipped because they're stripping everything out to sell this introductory level LT trim car of the Equinox. It's only front-wheel drive. The LT comes with manual adjustable front seats. I can live with that, I think. A 17.7-inch Google infotainment system, so still a big screen. They haven't made the screen smaller. An 11-inch digital gauge cluster. Fabric upholstery, of course. And some standard safety features like forward collision alert, rear cross traffic alert, which is kind of nice. Autonomous emergency braking, I like that. The comfort package for only $1,455 US will give you powered front seats with heating, which is important for us here in cold climate Canada, and heated steering wheel, HD surround vision, which is actually pretty decent for introductory models. So that's kind of impressive, actually, and rear pedestrian alert. So call me, Chevy. Might be interested in upgrading.
Sponsor the show.
U.S. approves 2 gigawatts of enhanced geothermal. This is a plant in Utah that's going to be approved and under construction soon. That's now, when we talk about solar being 2 gigawatts, it doesn't equate to 2 nuclear reactors like this does, because this is around the clock. It's a nice thing about geothermal is that it is a base load, so-called.
Yeah, base load power from basically constant heat that is way underground. That's great. So
this is a reminder that no U.S. small modular reactor projects have begun construction. This is the SMR capacity that we are looking at. There is 4 announced in gigawatts, 4 gigawatts, 4 nuclear reactors, normal nuclear reactors worth have been announced. There's 2 in pre-development. There's maybe less than 1 in early development or development, and 1 has been canceled. So yeah, that's got a long way to go, but tech companies are looking at that as an option and hoping that it works. Bloomberg NEF estimates that sales of electric vehicles, including both battery electric and plug-in hybrids, are headed to 16.7 million units this year, up from 13.9 last year. So it's still on an upward trajectory, just not as fast as we hoped or as fast as it did coming out of COVID. It is in line with the BNEF's forecast. They used to get their forecast wrong. They're getting better at forecasting now. And there's a link in your show notes to that, I hope. India surpasses 90 gigawatts of installed solar capacity, and the installed capacity there is now 201 gigawatts at the end of September. So a good chunk of that, not a majority, but a good chunk is rooftop. So rooftop is taking off there too. China exported more than 60,000 electric vehicles to the European Union in September. That's just in 1 month. And finally this week, federal and state researchers announced on Monday that they had found 19 million tons of lithium, a critical raw mineral for EV batteries and all batteries that are rechargeable currently, in a underground brine reservoir in Arkansas. Arkansas. Now get this, Brian. Are you sitting? Yeah, you're sitting down. You should sit down for this. This is important. Yeah. It's more than enough to meet the world's demand in one freaking U.S. state, in one find, they think. So it's been 2 years since my son's engineering prof said there's not enough lithium in the world to power the, forecast need. Well, since then, they found some in Nevada that would power the entire U.S.'s need forever. And now they found, the thing is, they weren't looking for this as much. Now they're looking for it more. We didn't need enough lithium. Now we're looking for it. We found a lot. There's one in Europe that was like most of the world's demand. So
no, the same things have happened with oil deposits. Like 20, 30 years ago, people thought, okay, we're reaching the end of our oil deposits. But guess what? That just spurs people on to look for more oil deposits. And guess what? They found them.
Researchers said that even the low end of the estimate would meet projected 2030 world demand for lithium in car batteries 9 times over. And people think we don't have enough, but really, we just haven't looked. That's the end of the lightning round.
And that is our show for this week. Again, contact us, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. On social media, we're Clean Energy Pod, and you can join our Patreon, which is a fairly new thing for us. You can join for free, but then you can also join and get more content if you, subscribe and give us a little bit of money. The link is in the show notes. And you can also support the show with a purchase from the merch store that James was just talking about.
Yes, so thank you to everyone who's made a purchase from our merch store, and thank you to everyone who's supporting us on Patreon. We really, really appreciate it. And the video version of our podcast is released the weekend following the audio version on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. That's right, Instagram. You can watch an hour-long video podcast of our show. I don't know why you would, but some people live there, so why not? Get away from the influencers peddling creams and lotions and watch our podcast. Subscribe on your podcast app, the one you're listening to us now, if you're listening to the audio version of our show, to get new episodes delivered every week. If you're on YouTube, for God's sake, smash that like and subscribe button. I won't push you to get the notification thing like everyone else does, but you know you want to. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.